Welcome to all of you. Welcome. We're going to talk about the golden tips for those who dare in the next 30 minutes. And to sort of make this digestible for you, we've cut the panel session in 4 parts. We're going to talk about the rationale and timing. Why do you want to go to the US? We're going to talk about funding. We're going to talk about the customer. And we're obviously going to talk about running your business, because you might think you will know what the US is all about, but that could be quite different. And before I do that, after my very own glowing introduction, let me introduce the panel to you. To my far right, we have Loek Janssen, your co-founder. Not founding partner, that was me. Co-founder Nova Credit, Roos Hofland, managing partner, Innovation Booster US, and Dorrestijn, CEO and co-founder of Dashmote. And to frame the discussion and to give you all a little bit of an idea who we've got in front of you, can you all sort of share with me what your connection to the US is?
Yeah. Thanks for having me, first of all. So I am the co-founder of Nova Credit. Nova Credit is a fintech business that launched in the US, and I started in the US. So we went through Y Combinator 2016, and so far I have raised our Series B and are still operating.
So starting, scaling, it all comes with stories from you. Roos.
Yeah, thanks for having me as well. Roos Hofland, I've set up Innovation Booster in the US. Started here in Amsterdam, and at one point we said we want to cross the pond and go to the US. That was my journey. So I started that, hired the first American boosters, and we mainly help large corporate with developing new products and services at a rapid pace.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you. My name is Dennis. I kind of have like a recurring thing with the US. So my first company, actually, I started with 2 American co-founders and actually sold an American company. And then I worked in America for a while. And then my latest startup, Dashmote, we expanded to the US about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And we help companies get insights out of images.
Yeah. And we've got the beauty is we've got experiences from around the age ranges and history as well. I brought the very first internet bank into Europe, which was in 1995. We're just talking about it.
Yeah.
Our most recent company we sold into a very large corporate into the US, which is also an interesting experience. But let's first go back before you go to the US, because very often people say, I'm going to the US, and then they all talk and they get excited about, how we're going to do it. Let's do it. But I think it's very important to make the other step first. Why do you want to go to the US? What's your rationale? And Roos, I think with your Innovation Booster, you really look at this. Can you?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, as Innovation Booster, you have to keep on innovating your own innovation methodology, of course. And I think as all Dutch startups experience is really that you have your first small clients, first Dutch companies. Maybe you go up to bigger, larger companies, and then finally Fortune 500. And often those are also the Dutch companies. But how do you want to scale that up? And for us, that was the dream to go to New York as more or less the capital of the world, where there are probably a lot more opportunities. That's what we thought. But the motivation was really, innovating our own innovation methodology and keeping on stepping up our game.
Yeah, and timing is also of the essence. Do you have to prepare long, or do you just jump on an opportunity? What was your experience?
I think for me, because I started in the US, which is probably a bit different. I haven't really started a venture-backed business here in the Netherlands.
And why did you start in the US? Was it just because you were there, or because you thought the main opportunity was there?
It ended up that the best opportunity was there for this fintech business, but I wanted to grow my academic side. So I went to Stanford to study, very deep into mathematics, very theoretical. And then I ended up doing a course that was building a prototype, a startup, like around the thinking of startup with my 2 now co-founders. And at graduation day, we were off to the races with going to Y Combinator. So it was really just like the Stanford ecosystem brought me there. So.
Yeah. Dennis.
Yeah, for me, of course, it's always good to have like a want or something, but for us, it was traction mostly. So we initially started in Europe, and then our clients asked if they could use the platform also in the US. And we said we could do it. And then we kind of went along with them as a launching customer. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I know that particularly for Europeans, but for Dutch in particular, it's always almost an automatic route. The real money is in the US, the real market is in the US. But there's also lots of hurdles in the US, and you're both in fintech. So, I mean, I'm in fintech. Regulation's different. It's not national. It is sort of can be different across states. Did you even think about it before you decided to go to the US? And I don't mean it in a derogatory way, but
Yeah. You go
You
first.
can
Dennis.
go first. Okay.
Okay.
oh, they're going to be polite.
Yeah.
Don't bother.
Glass of
That's
Sherry.
all, Mike. Yeah. Well, so for me, it's again because I started there. What I found was that when it comes to regulations, it's often seen as something that is kind of scary, and you want to stay as far away from that as possible. And I actually think it's quite the opposite when you're going. So from my own experience, a funny story was that in San Francisco, where our main office was, since we are in fintech and we were making money, we were growing, we were like, okay, well, we're in this gray space of legal and regulatory thing because that's where value is to be added, right? So what we did is we helped immigrants with a credit history, and that was never done before. So what we did instead was, instead of like, hey, we're not going to talk to regulators, we're trying to fly very low under the radar, we invited the board of the CFPB, for example, into our office and very transparent, like, hey, this is who we are, this is what we do. And eventually, when we become big enough that they start to care, we already are on their radar and they know what we do. And I think the biggest learning for us was the regulators know who they are. That's important. But also, they are not there to generally kill you as a business, right? They want innovation for the US. So work with them or find a way to work with them. Was very helpful for my understanding of growing.
Yeah, and I think it's a very important one not to oversee because it can really make or break your whole business model.
Yeah, for me, it was also about like, first of all, when you have no knowledge or something, you try to reach out to different people.
Yeah.
And then you're starting to understand like how the concepting of things are. So for me, a different example, we were working on a deal actually with investors, and it was a mix between Asian investors, American investors, and European investors. And then I found out actually that regulatory-wise or legal-wise in the US, there's no base book or something. So here, when you think about contracting or stuff like this, there's something to fall back on. Every rule is written out. In the US, however, it all stalls blanco. So you have to write everything out yourself, essentially. And so once you switch that mindset, okay, it also offers a lot of opportunity. It's more work, and then you can work from that point on and essentially get the right knowledge to build further on.
It's really funny you say that because I remember working in London and we had a stockbroking system. It is sort of 1988, and we wanted to open the market in Eastern Europe because the wall was falling and everything. And they said, yeah, we have a stock market, but we have no rules. And so we basically wrote the rules because we reversed the code from the software. So lots of interesting things to do. So let's talk about doing business in the US. And I'm going to correct the biggest one first. We all think we understand America. We watch American movies and we speak reasonably good English or American, which is a very different language, they say. What is the biggest, misconception or where you went wrong or right? Give us, whatever.
Yeah, I personally had the feeling when I got there, really, indeed, you speak the same language and you think, all right, we understand each other, we're in Western companies, this works. In the end, that's not really the case. They're total different people. They have different incentives, different purpose in life.
Give us some examples. What is a different incentive? What you see with Americans that really works?
Well, in business, I would say, everything is bonus driven, right? Here in the US, that's not, or in the Netherlands, of course, we have a bonus structure, but it's not, let's say, your entire salary times two. And that's what's happening there. And people actually depend on their bonus structure. So that's a total different experience. Here you buy maybe a Porsche from that. In the US, you have to pay your tuitions. Right. Yeah. So that's totally different. And so how I see that most of the time I try to compare it between peaches and coconuts. Which sounds a bit strange, of course, but
tell us.
Yeah, so really Americans, I would say, are the peaches. So the ones where you can have very easy conversations with, but it's very hard to crack it and to get to the core. And coconuts are we as Europeans. It's very hard to get in their trusting zone. So, but if you're there and people trust you, you're done, and it's, everything is okay. And that goes with conversations with friends, but also I would say with legal structures.
Yeah.
With my business, in the Netherlands, we sometimes started a project without having the entire contract in place. That's absolutely not an option in the US. I need 4 contracts for that.
Yeah. I think just to correct those two, because I think trust is an important one, and we have a different concept about it. So I'd love the perception from you two. But also the other one, we all know that America is much more litigation based.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you protect or prepare for that? Who goes first?
Yeah. No, well,
you obviously go first.
Yeah, since I had the fintech experience as well, it's just laden with regulatory and with like, hey, you have to make sure everything's buttoned up and you do everything right. So,
but also doing business.
Well, and that's I think the thing that you mentioned in your question, which is exactly what was at the core dilemma that we had to make in the beginning of our journey. Because when we raised our first seed rounds after Y Combinator, we were like, okay, we have to build a product. The software, to be honest, it's not rocket science. It's not like the new AI that is novel everywhere. The main value is in this gray space of legal. Like, how can we stitch these data sources from foreign data sources together with the with the American system, and how can they accept that? There was nothing written, right? So what we had to do is we had to think, okay, we can get an external counsel which gives us advice on how to mitigate this and how to kind of meander in this space to build something that's robust. But that's a lot of money. And we just didn't have that much money, right? If we also have to hire a team. So what we decided eventually was to hire an internal general counsel as one of our first hires. I think it was the second hire. And he came from being a director or like head of a legal department at Credit Karma. So someone who was really well established in the space. And it was quite costly. But in the end, he was someone who could say no to this, but then not like go back and do more research. It's like, no, but what if?
Yeah, but they're not protecting their company's legal brand. So it's different. Yeah,
exactly. Because he was also business oriented. It was like, we have to close the sale. So no, we can do it this way, but what if we do it this way and then go towards this direction? And that is very helpful in like doing business with legal in mind.
And Dennis, is there, in your perception, a big difference in the US between East and West Coast and the whole lot in between? Or
I think this,
in terms of culture and doing business?
Yeah, I think this whole question is a good one because I want to go a bit more extreme. I think it's a complete misguidance because the language we might understand, but then culture-wise, it's completely different, to be honest, in a lot of different accounts. And then on a more granular level, between the different areas within the US, and if you even do West, Middle, and East, there's a complete difference in how they operate and how they think.
Have you experienced that?
I think the normal thing with for me the US is where we might have an attitude where, let's say we ask for help, and Dutch people in general, they want to help, but they're a bit more, looking out of the tree, cut out the boom kijken, kind of behavior. And then once we see that other people help, we will help as well, When the US is the opposite, so they instantly help first, but if you then screw up, they won't help you again, So that's like a big switch. And then when it comes to like the differences between the states and different areas, you really have to understand that it might be like one market, one country, but how they operate and how they think, there's a lobby culture in more in the middle. In the West, and the networking is different, how they operate, the more lean back parts and these type of things. So I think it makes a lot of sense to kind of research where is your market, where would you like to be, and that's how we did as well. So kind of figuring out what states make the most sense, where are the business located that are prime for you to be interesting.
We in our pre-session we had a lot of fun as well, and we were talking about the network effect. And I lived for a long time in London, and the network effect was basically having very civilized gin and tonics with each other. You talked about a very different network experiences, Loek, but you also said they're incredibly important if you want to start and grow your business.
Well, there's nothing wrong with gin and tonic networks. I think you should have those as well at the right time. But yes, especially in the States, if I make the contrast between the Netherlands and if I take a more broader Europe, the United States are more homogenous in a way, right? Similar culture between states, language they all understand. And so having network effects in the US could actually yield just better benefits, right? It's like an exponential network effect. If you have more people, you just get more business model proof and validation before you move to your next milestone for raising money or moving forward. And so I think that is something that the US just brings as a general advantage. It's this network effect because it's generally homogeneous compared to Europe.
They also love it a lot more, essentially speaking. So where we are more prone to maybe go to a network event, stick with the people we know, maybe go to a second group.
Yeah.
Americans kind
They
of
actually
switch.
love meeting new people.
Yeah, they love.
It's
They
very
jump
different.
from groups to groups
True.
to groups, you know. So
Yeah,
that's like
very different.
you have to get into that attitude yourself. It's
Yeah.
going so quickly.
Yeah.
Person is gone within like 30 seconds. you know?
Exactly. And the big
Yeah.
pro is in general, they love to meet Europeans.
Yeah.
Moving on to fundraising, again, probably big difference on where you raise funds, what sort of funds typically nestle on the West Coast or the East Coast. Maybe somebody wants to, and I'm going to finish off that round with you, Roos, because you did it differently. But let's go to, I mean, you're raising on the East Coast,
we
West
raise on the
Coast.
East
Yeah.
Coast.
So
West
give
Coast.
us a short in terms of time. Yeah.
You want to start, Loek?
Perspective.
Well, I feel taking up a lot of time here. So So from a fundraising perspective, what we did is we went through Y Combinator.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we also did Pair Ventures, which is another accelerator, because they gave us different benefits to Y Combinator, and there's a whole thing there I can go onto at some point. But what we did is we raised a small amount before demo day of Y Combinator. And it's generally advised against by Y Combinator because you got to focus on products, and I still stand by that. But for us, it was kind of a no-brainer because we had a family from the other accelerator, and they wanted to give us, like a good deal.
Yeah.
And that brought to us some FOMO, or some like, hey, this company already raised money, because the lines in Silicon Valley are very short. Everyone talks.
And they're networked. So they talk to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The fire spreads in a way of like who is our
Don't
companies
say
and like
it.
what's going on. But eventually what that meant for us is that we could build this syndicate of investors, so very smart investors that were like we had to pick so we had the benefit of picking, I should rather say.
Yeah. Okay.
In like the good way, where it benefited us from smart money, and we could do that.
In the interest of time, I'm going to actually move to the customer now, before we forget, because that's important. And then we're going to go to the question and answers. Roos, you started your funding actually through the customer.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
what was it like? And I think this is the real question that will intrigue the audience.
Yeah.
What is it like to get your first launching customer?
Yeah, that was amazing, of course, amazing experience. But I got my first launching customer in the Netherlands, a Dutch account, where I set up the innovation hub in the US. I learned from that, did the first project myself, understood the market. It was very, very helpful. And on the side, I've been doing sales.
Yeah.
And from that way, I've started the business. So I had to earn my money first. And then.
And what was the first, how did you get to the first customer in the US? What was that experience like?
Just what we're talking about, drinking wines and being out there, making sure that you talk with all kinds of people from large organizations, going to big events.
Yeah.
That was all about it. Yeah. And LinkedIn, of course. Big piece.
And Dennis, first customers, and then you need to start scaling. What is that like in with your customer community? Do you go to typical marketing approach, like?
No, I think,
or more the business development way that we tend to do in Europe.
Yeah, I think, we went more for the latter. So mostly developing the relationship with the customers. For us, it was also really random. Also with gin tonics actually. So just we found a random event that we won, and then we won a ticket to a Jewish networking event we just didn't know.
Yeah.
And then we met a random person who introduced us to our first client over there. And in the same way, I kind of scaled as well. So through that contact, we found other like a dinner group that we were invited to, and then we pitched again, and then we upsold kind of the scaling of that account basically to the US. Yeah.
Selling. Another one is always selling direct or through partnerships. I found through the many companies that I was engaged in as a startup that you can spend your life working with partners, and the return is not always as promising as one thinks.
Yeah.
And as a small startup, you have limited resources.
Yeah.
However, the breakthrough is often through partners. So what is your take on selling direct or working with partners? Is it harder than over here, or?
Yeah. I can start. Yeah, I would say when you're starting going to the US, definitely do not work with partners. I think it's a waste of time unless you're really specific on what you need. I think later on, when you understand the American customers, because that's also a mistake that we think the customer profile, the persona in the US is the same as Europe.
Yeah.
At least in our case, it definitely was not.
Give me an example.
I think even if for us, we have a SaaS product, there's a platform, we thought they would use it in the exact same way, right? But in our case, they were more proficient already with these type of software, so they were aware, so they thought a bit further ahead, but also in different ways how they
pushing you up your own
roadmap. Exactly. So even like our whole onboarding and these type of things had to be adjusted to that part. And partners, they don't have this experience, they don't know your platform or your solution, so until you have figured it out, I would stray away for that. And it's very hard to do the diligence which ones are the right partners. Americans, they always say as a hobby, they like to marketing the profile themselves. So it's hard to find which one are the right quality to be engaging with and working with.
Have you had any experiences there, Loek or Roos?
I echo that. Sorry. If you have any
same here. I've just been doing sales mainly by myself.
Yeah. Okay, let's see what you all said. We were looking at the burning issues, and we tried to sort of look at all those issues already in this part of the topic. But I do see indeed that most of the audience, really wants to get practical aspects about setting up office and legal aspects. So let's move into that space a little bit with my first question, actually from Ruben. Thank you very much, Ruben. He says, just really give me practically, what are the minimal things? And if we say minimal, legal things, so let's keep it at 5. What are the 5 bare essentials you have to set up before you can start an office in the US? What would you say?
Yeah, I can say something to that. If you do business in the US, you're likely to pay taxes there. And so thinking about that part is important. Maybe a local entity would work. That's one. 2, depending on if from a fintech perspective, I would say get your certification already going. Like we needed SOC 2 certification, but also ISO 27. There's a lot of jargon there. But think about that ahead of time because it's going to take you a while. And I may leave it at that, and maybe Roos or Dennis can jump in.
I just had the main thing, having a proper contract and NDAs. That was the main, and of course the entity. But that was what I needed most.
A proper contract, you mean with the customer?
With the customers and for employees. Yeah.
And?
Employees.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's a bit of a wider question, but I think on the first hand, for the ones who maybe are thinking about going, that's for me separate. Just book a trip, stay for 2 weeks, rent a place, and actually work, co-working space or something. And then on the setup part, I know we talked about partners when it came to clients. When it comes to these practices, I would pick partners, or at least do your research. For me, personally speaking, the government was really helpful, the consulate, the startup liaison. So I really would urge to go there. But there are also wonderful partners who have been dealing with Dutch startups going to the US very often. So personally, we use this part.
But also, if you have a cloud offering, we find that, working with people like Microsoft, if you're in the Azure cloud, they have fantastic partnership programs, and they really can help you tremendously.
On that note, I have one more thing, which is in the US, the culture is if you reach out to, for example, legal agency, an office or representative, they're super happy to jump on a call. And they can also just walk you through. They won't charge you. So just get some hey, what do I need?
Frequency, exactly. Yeah. And other entrepreneurs always reach out to ones you can target, Loek or Roos,
Absolutely. You've got 4 addresses today, so that's the good news. Building a little bit on that previous question, because I do know how incredibly hard it is to get that first customer and to get your product right. Because it is inevitable that when you have a startup that you're totally in love with your own baby and you only see it through your own eyes. And when you look in the mirror, you see yourself, not your customer. So I would say have a good look at your proposition, and even before you have an MVP, think about, is this really relevant here? And often we think we can do it in a bubble, we can do it in an incubator, but I found actually just booking a ticket and going there and talking to people works. And look, I know that you had similar experiences, so we really want to tell them about that experience, because I think it is massively important.
Yeah, it is. It's as Steve Blank used to say in the course that what we developed this Nova Credit thesis is get out the room, right? A company's not built inside the room behind your computer with research. So to keep it short, what was important for us is we had a small prototype that was literally just smashed together data that didn't really represent anything. But we went to these credit unions in Palo Alto with our Mini that my co-founder had, this little Mini racing through Palo Alto, just me in time after class to get to the meetings, and then give our the people that we had the meetings with, these CEOs from these credit unions, presented basically fake data and say hey, do you want to give a loan to this immigrant? And that's how we got the feedback, and we got
Yeah.
out of that bubble to see how our customers were, even though we had nothing yet at that
Yeah.
point.
And it sounds awful in these days when we have to keep distances, but it really happens in real life. So do go out and talk. One thing we haven't touched on yet is talent. And I want to go and ask, in particular, I think Loek and Roos to comment on how do you find talent in the US and how do you hire? And because we come from a very robust, sticky labor market, it's different in the US, but what are the do's and don'ts around hiring and keeping them on board? Yeah.
Well, what I experienced personally, actually, a lot of people told me, go through your network. I hired some people through my network. Those are also the ones that I fired. So honestly, not the best experience. So
and sorry not to walk over that.
Yeah.
Was it because you tended to hire people who were like you or who you liked?
No, I think I hired people that just had a perfect marketing pitch about themselves and knew all the buzzwords. And
Okay.
They started and they always had a good impression also with the clients. So I thought, okay, this is good. And then actually when running the projects, you're like, this is behind. So yeah, they know how to sell
but it's
themselves.
important. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so what is the right way to go about it?
So I really learned from myself is really understand what you want, what you need. And from there on, understand exactly the concrete questions that you want to answer. And I do cases now. So I have, of course, I had a case, but now I have multiple case rounds.
Yeah.
so
you let them do something before
I let
you
them
hire
do
them.
stuff. I invite multiple people. Then they give pitches. They
References.
references, of course. Yeah, all the normal stuff that I think we do here in the Netherlands as well. But I really learned have multiple cases, have them pitch to each other.
And do you go LinkedIn or recruitment agency or direct or?
No, I do LinkedIn mostly. Yeah.
Anything, Loek, Dennis, that you would like to add? Also, like hiring. What sort of contract is a normal thing to start off with somebody?
No, I think I wanted to emphasize on what Roos said in terms of you really have to do good due diligence, whether it's case or other means, because they're incredibly better at selling themselves.
Absolutely.
So, and the price is much higher, so you have less chances to take on it.
Yeah.
Personally, it did help a little bit more with personal network, but you do have to do the double checking. And I would say, don't go too quick for the ones. Take your time, essentially speaking, because it's also harder.
And how long are you allowed to keep people on a temporary contract?
That's a good question.
Normally
I would,
it's up to you, really.
It's different.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's freer than here.
Like you also alluded to, it's like the rigid market here with labor is not at all the same in the US. So if you're transparent about hey, we're just gonna get a full contract, get the benefits, but we have check-ins, milestones, feedback cycles, and if it doesn't work out for both of us, c'est la vie.
Really that incentivized structure, that is something that maybe here has not been built so much or used so much. There, it's really the standard. So if you don't have it, they get stunned about it.
Okay, because that was my last point on this hiring. What are the real incentives? And of course, you cannot read somebody's mind, but we know money is a big driver. So how do you structure the money thing between success and fixed base? Because you also don't want somebody who is sweating over his paying the mortgage all day and doesn't focus on his job. So what is the balance? And then what are the other things apart from the hip and cool things that were sort of slowly fading out again?
So what I experienced, actually, what I thought, being here in the Netherlands, a lot of people want vacation days, right? Not popular at all in the US. They don't care. Medical, they
very
care.
Popular.
Very important. Then of course, other aspects like responsibility in the US is very hierarchical. So you have your boss and you do the templates and whatnot. But so having pure responsibility, that's something they cared about. And the opportunity to go, for instance, to Europe. So I had multiple trips to work with other kinds of organizations in Europe. So these kinds of things helped a lot.
Okay. Yeah. And then on to the marvelous subject of visa. Peter Smith is asking, what kind of visa do you need? We all know that, the situation is, let's say, fickle. It's hard to sort of predict. But if you would be sort of ready to pack your bags to go over there soonest, what is the visa situation? Who wants to sort of elaborate on that a bit? And how? And then secondly, I'm going to ask somebody else to elaborate on how do you get a visa? Do you do it on your own, or is that good help?
I think adding on when Luke was talking about the regulatory part, when it comes to visa, start early. It really takes a lot of time.
Okay.
All of these administrative things. So don't get it. It's not going to be done in like a month or 2 months.
No, because your exploratory trip, you go on a tourist visa, and that's what, 3 months?
Yeah, 3 months. Yeah, exactly. That's the max length of it.
Yeah.
And there are some exceptions, but there's a lot of changes. It is possible, however. So I don't want to make it, but really get some advice on it. There are specific lawyers who will help out with this kind of experience. I think it's too hard of a topic to really find out by yourself, or the time is not worth it as as what you're doing.
And so there are a lot of these online help you with your visum sort of things. Do you have good experiences with those, or do you say go to a proper lawyer?
I don't have experience with those specifically. I talked to a proper lawyer because I was already there. It was easy for me to just have someone there in the network of Y Combinator.
And it might differ per state, and it might differ per what you're bringing to the economy. Huh? What is your education level? What is your plans?
Yeah, you have this thing called immigration lawyers, and actually the consulates, the different ones, so whether San Francisco or New York, they actually have like people they know who have done these setups.
I was thinking the Dutch consulate can probably help.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
okay, brilliant. Does cold outreach to enterprises work, or do you always need introductions? Ruben Wieman is asking this. The famous cold calling.
Good question. Yeah, it really works. Like where here, marketing, sales is considered absolutely dirty. There they love it, So cold calling, they also thrive with the incentivizing thing. So it depends, of course, on your business specific, but definitely there's a much more higher appetite. People don't feel.
And they don't have the GDPR.
Exactly.
Exactly. I echo the cold calling. We also cold called and just jumped into. But I have to say, they also have a very culture of warm intros.
Yes.
Which, if you have a warm intro, you jump a few people
all
in
the
that
steps.
line
You jump
of the company.
Which comes back to your earlier point about the network effect. So it really matters but also to build and not burn your trust in that network. That's important. And then there's one more question, which I found interesting as well. And it's about, can you grow a network from Europe? So what is your view on using a Europe-based team to expand into the US? Is it at all possible, or do you really have to have a foot in the market?
I would say have boots on the ground. Yeah, definitely. You have to understand the culture, as we discussed already. You have to understand the people. You have to be there. This is, of course, different now due to COVID. I'm now also stuck here in Amsterdam, but I do notice that it's still possible to network.
Yeah.
However, that's in the evenings though, and late at night sometimes, but that's fine.
Yeah, we have the same. We have one guy here, Sven, who's doing it from here, but I do think you have to have that mindset that is different. So multitasking is very hard. I think the sales is different in the US than it is here. So and then preferably boots on the ground. Yeah.
And Jouke is asking about the difference between raising money in Europe versus US, and I could probably elaborate a little bit on that as well myself. What's interesting is that European VCs tend to be extremely interested in your growth plans towards the US. US VCs, in my opinion, are not massively interested in growth plans outside the US, unless it's Asia. For them, Europe is a hard nut to crack. It's very interesting, but it's not a mass market, and it's very difficult. And one difference I also saw is where European VCs will really, very soon on, early on, come with the yes, but questions. A US VC wants you to be bigger and bolder than we tend to be off our own back. But please respond to this.
I think culture is also different. I mean, VCs, the word is the same, but the concept is the structure of the VC is completely different. So to make it easier, I always say in Europe, generalizing, of course, we invest into airplanes, business that are pretty stable. They're going to make revenue, never going to go for the space. And in American, the model is invest in rocket ships,
Get in early.
Exactly. A lot will fail, but some will make it, and that's a different mentality. So they look for opportunities that can grow massively, and otherwise it's not interesting for them.
I think it's also baked into our culture.
Yeah,
a lot.
We have a more risk-averse way of doing things. And it's just like, no, if I'm going to invest money,
Yeah,
If one out of the
100%.
100 is
Yeah.
maybe a unicorn, I don't care about what the rest is.
Yeah, exactly. On less friendly days than today, I've been known to insult VCs, European VCs, at BNR Zaken because I
Yeah.
said, in all fairness, there really are no VCs outside London in Europe.
I don't want to burn all the VCs here off because they're doing good
No,
job.
we don't.
They're
They're doing good
changing
jobs.
it.
But the first question is,
But I
do you have
agree.
a customer and do you have revenue?
100%. It's
And
by
that's
default.
exactly, and that's not
Yeah.
that's not venture capital. So we're coming to the end of the of this panel, but before I'm going to let you off the hook, I really would each of you to give me your sort of life-changing, pivotal moment in relation to your work in the US. What was your life-changing moment? Roos, can I confidently start with you? You're
Absolutely,
shaking. Good.
absolutely. My life-changing moment was really the moment that I sold the big deal to my first Fortune 500 headquartered in New York City. That was really my goal. There are 54. And I want to get them all, but we have to see. But this was the first, and it's been a long-lasting client, so that's great.
For me, it was the moment I already talked about when we drove through Palo Alto with our little car, had no real product. We were just students, and these credit unions took us really seriously. And like they should have, right? I mean, we built a good product. But at that
And you
time,
built a beautiful company.
I don't know.
Yeah.
So that
If
was
you
a
believe in
pivotal
it, don't give up.
Yes.
Oh, for me, I've many, but one. Okay, this one is okay. I remember this day pretty well. 42-hour flight, 4-step offers. I arrive in Boston, and on the urge of my current investor, they said, "Take this meeting, please." And I was not interested. I went to the meeting. All set. I don't sweat easily, but I was pretty like I didn't have time to even clean up. Went into the meeting. Went absolutely horrid, in my opinion, right? So at someone, and he was just staring at me, and it was like this awkward silence for like a minute. I was like, okay, and then all of a sudden, like an immediate switch, and he fell in love with what we're doing, and it really took us there. And then he started to sell because all Americans do when they're interested to sell, and yeah, and that just took us with me like, hey, you know, as an entrepreneur, you are the number one person who believes in what you're doing. But then finding somebody else who has that same belief, you know, and then also the resources or other stuff to help you out further. That is like an aha moment, like, hey, you can find these similar-minded people. And I don't want to say they're not here in Europe, but they're much more there, you know. So yeah, if you're looking for that other where you find like, I cannot find others to see the same light, they are around, you know, but America a little bit more.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, and I have just a fun story to share with you at the very end. And having worked for a very long time in London, which is very different, I had to go to the US. My business partner then couldn't go with me, but we wanted to take a stake in a company in Houston. And I was sitting in the lobby, and the secretary said, "Oh, you're here for this, for the chairman and his son." "Yes, I am, for the deal." And we went. He says, "Well, when your boss comes back from the guest room, we will take you two upstairs." And I thought, okay, so they think I'm the secretary. That's fine.
Yeah.
This was 15 years ago. We went upstairs. I met the chairman, and he said, "Ah, so you are the meeting." I said, "Yes, and you've just lost your first $100,000.
Yeah.
And he said, "Good sport. I'm all for it." And we're still working together ever since. So they do take humor, and it is all about the money. And I would never dare to say that in the UK.
Yeah.
With that, thank you very much. The market is for those who dare. And so take these golden tips from the panel. Thank you very much for all your insights. Absolute wonderful contributions. Go get them.